Thanks, Hugh, and thanks for Charles and Ellen and team for inviting me to come and speak to you today, very briefly, about the Dominick Street Climate Resilient Placemaking Project. And while the project I'm going to talk about today, or going to end up speaking about, is specifically about the three flat blocks you can see on the left-hand side of the image of Dominick Street, going up across the screen. We call it a climate resilient placemaking project because not only is it part of the wider regeneration of Dominick Street Lower, but we are also hoping that the project will inform our wider flat complex regeneration programme when we're retrofitting, and hopefully help us make better decisions about retrofitting. Dublin City Council is the largest residential landlord in the state. I find that a bit surprising myself. But Dublin City Council owns 24,000 homes, and just under half of those are flats. 63% of the flats are over 50 years old. So, as you can see from that image, they come in all shapes and sizes. On the top left-hand corner, you've got Crampton Buildings from 1891, and on the bottom right-hand corner, you've got O'Devany Gardens, which was completed, phase one, which was completed last year. And in between, you've got images of buildings that represent all of the decades in between. And I mentioned earlier, just from the floor, I made a comment about the Keeling chart, which was when Keeling mapped CO2 emissions, started mapping CO2 emissions in 1958. Well, that was just about the time that we built the senior citizen development in the middle row on the left-hand side. So they come in all shapes and sizes. Some are protected structures, some are not protected but of historic interest. However, collectively they do all contribute to Dublin's architectural identity. And so they are arguably all significant. But then, one also has to accept the reality that they also suffer from stigmatization. And many of our flat blocks, public housing as they are associated with social deprivation. They are seen by architects and planners as not representing the best in urban design, etc., etc. So they are stigmatized. I was interested in Jennifer's comment earlier about Trinity coming to realise that their new development or buildings were an asset, not a liability. Well, often we see our flat blocks as liabilities, not assets. And so the default position is usually to demolish. Alan Mee did make a comment last night after Susan's talk. He said, Ballymun, why do we know why we've lost it? Why we lost those blocks? And I was sitting there and he was looking at me and I thought, no, I'm not answering you now, Alan. Where do I start? I think David Hughes said from the audience earlier, architectural projects are a long time in the making, and regeneration programs are when they are being realized, well, the decision that informed whatever's happening was made 5-10 years earlier. This discussion about should we demolish our flat complexes, should we retrofit our flat complexes, we better make the decision quickly because we're already acting on decisions we would have made 5-10 years ago, and that ocean liner doesn't turn around easily. Don't forget, we're talking about people's homes here, and the communities who live in these complexes also have a say in what happens their homes. And often their desire is for new homes. You know, they want new homes. So this is all a complex business, and there's a lot of criteria that have to be considered when we are looking at what to do with people's homes. And but just also to note, in Ireland you cannot buy, a local authority tenant can purchase their house. They cannot purchase their flat. That means that Dublin City Council and other local authorities, when they have a flat complex, they own all of it. There are no bought-out homes in there. That means that the decision to demolish is more feasible. We've audited all our complexes. We've prioritised what should or shouldn't be done, which ones are most urgently in need of work. We've taken decisions about some that should be demolished and some that can be retrofitted. Ultimately, though, our overarching criteria is to create high-quality homes, similar to the development you see on the right-hand side, which is our recently completed scheme project on North King Street, which is an A-rated home, and it isn't on the site of a demolished flat block. On the left-hand side, we have Ballybock House by Herbert Sims. That's a protected structure. We're not going to be demolishing that. We have done a pilot retrofit project on one of the flats there. And these diagrams, I suppose, illustrate the carbon problem for architects and developers and really everybody. Because on the left-hand side, there's a cross-section through Ballybock House. And before it was retrofitted. So we did a pilot retrofit project on Ballybock House. We amalgamated 2 flats on the ground floor into one, and we upgraded the flat. And it was very much about learning. You know, how do you retrofit a Sims building? So the middle image is post-retrofit. It's a cross-section through the rear elevation. It achieves a high BER. And on the right-hand side is a cross-section through Sean Foster House, North King Street, which I showed you earlier. And I liken this to an image or comparison between a skinny teenager and a sumo wrestler, because you can see the amount of materials that go into an NZEB apartment building. You can see the complexity that goes into construction, detailing and construction that goes into. I even had to, after the team gave me that section, somebody came rushing over to me and said, "Oh, sorry, we left out some insulation." So I had to look. Okay, don't draw it again. I'll just stick it onto the PowerPoint. It does beg the question. My screen's disappeared. It does beg the question: it's come back now? Is our effort to create perfectly performing, NZEB buildings, homes, is that going to get in the way of our need to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, have our emissions by 2030? Are we going to overshoot our targets? That conversation came up earlier as well. So we've got all these conflicting and competing criteria. We've got to, and I suppose we're hoping that a project like Dominick Street can help us answer some of those questions, these questions. How do we meet our Paris, targets? Are the materials that go into NZEB buildings, or even deep renovation of buildings, are they actually going to make us overshoot our targets? We have a housing crisis. We need to produce homes. We need to densify our sites. Where does that fit into the carbon challenge? How long will it take if you decide to demolish a flat complexes versus retrofit? How long will that take before you actually get your hands on these new homes? Probably take about 10 years by the time you detenant. Do we even have the construction skills, the design skills, to actually retrofit properly? Maybe we aren't quite there yet. Can we reimagine the buildings we already have? I think that's a big one for architects. It was discussed earlier. And how do we make better decisions? I mean, can we actually gather data to help us make better decisions? Which brings me onto Dominick Street, finally. The Dominick Street flat complex was built in the 60s and 70s. The left-hand side, the east side, that L-shaped 5 blocks on the site was built first. The 3 blocks on the right-hand side, outlined in orange, were built afterwards. In 2006, a decision was made to regenerate the estate, so all of it, all 198 homes across those 8 blocks. Started off with a PPP, public-private partnership, for those of you who aren't familiar with that term. That collapsed. That big bang project collapsed in the global economic crash. In 2011, DCC, we put together a master plan to see how would we get this back on track. The plan was still to demolish everything. In 2012, the 5 blocks outlined in white were demolished on the east side. In 2013, there was a remarkable project. A meanwhile use occurred on that vacant site, which was Granby Park. In 2018, Cotter Nessens and Dennis Byrne Architects, the architects for the scheme on the east side, they had designed, we got planning permission for a new development of 72 homes on the east side. That started construction. It was finished in 2022. And all the residents from the 3 blocks outlined in orange, Dominick Street West, have moved across the road into their new homes. Dominick Street, it's always struck me as being about opportunity. I don't know why. It just always seemed to be a site that was about opportunity. And just by way of example, in 2009 with the UCD, Alice Clancy, Fiona Hughes and James Ross O'Hare, who had started an initiative in UCD, What If, they partnered with us and we held a little competition called Dublin House, which was to see, well, okay, this was in response to the global economic crash. We can't develop Dominick Street with a big bang solution. Maybe we can develop it incrementally. That's just by way of example. What's the opportunity now? What crisis are we responding to now? Well, we're responding to the climate crisis. And again, Dominick Street, the 3 existing blocks, which you can see a snapshot of on the left-hand side, are looking across the road at the wonderful new development. It's like somebody said earlier, I think it was Simon, not against new development. And if you're going to do new development, do it brilliantly. Dominick Street, the 3 blocks, they do represent an opportunity to pilot a retrofit project at scale and to learn from it. It's not the only retrofit project we're doing. We're doing Constitution Hill as a retrofit project with additionality. However, the unique opportunity here is that the blocks are vacant. So that means when we do the project, it's not going to get muddled and in with all of the other challenges that come with a project where you have to decant residents. That extends the program. It adds to cost. We can focus on the retrofit issues. There are 3 identical blocks, so they offer opportunities to maybe try different retrofit solutions. We can measure, we can learn, we can disseminate the findings, we can explore best practice in water management, SUDS, greening, circular economy and positive energy. The location of the project at a Lewis stop right bang in the city centre allows us to, I suppose, maximise our communications and, I suppose, promotional opportunities. And ultimately, I suppose, it's about that question, how do we reimagine the buildings we have? Because to me, climate action is about redesigning our expectations. We have to redesign our expectations as to what is an okay way to live. And for architects, we have to redesign our expectations. So the opportunity is, if we've got a first-class building on the right-hand side, first-class homes, NZEB, Well, the Dominick Street flats were first class when they were built. Why can't they be highly desirable again? So where are we now? I suppose we started to try and grapple with the technical issues. We commissioned a digital twin of the 3 blocks that has helped start to inform us about the various options, deep versus not so deep renovation. We've applied for funding to the department, so it's now a project, and there's a lot of work goes into applying for funding. And I suppose most importantly, we have to actually meaningfully engage. So we have started to look at meanwhile uses for the rear of the site, not dissimilar to Granby Park. This is an image of Granby Park. So thank you.